Okay, we're rolling.
Hey, welcome back to the How to Podcast series. It's Dave with you. We are here talking podcasting, and if this is your first time with me on the show, I'm thrilled that you found the podcast. We're going to get right into it today. We're going to try to avoid using the big words. You know, the big words. We're going to talk normally, like normal people, and just got to dispel this myth that using big words like just isn't something that connects people, and in some cases can actually repel your audience. I want you to talk on your show like you would talk to a friend, how you would speak around the dinner table with your family when you say, pass the salt, that kind of thing. That's how we, do, as podcasters, connect with our audience. And if you love using big words, this might not be the episode for you. Just so you know, I'm going to use smaller words, and I hope I don't offend you. Talking big words on the podcast. Welcome to the show. It's How to Podcast series, howtopodcast.ca. So I think we need to know our audience, first of all. Let's just start here. This is a good starting point. If you have a highly technical podcast and you're talking to an audience of highly technical people, then go for it. Use the words that they use. No problem. Not going to get a lot of new people who are novices, who don't understand the process behind the scenes. They won't know a thing about what you're talking about. But if that's not your target audience, that's fine. Then do whatever you need to do in your podcast. Remember, there's no rules. There are no rules. I'll say it right from the beginning in podcasting. No rules. But if you're trying to reach an audience that does not understand the intricacies of what you're talking about, they don't have the background, the knowledge, the years in the industry that you have, and you're trying to reach an audience of people that are new to what you talk about, your overinflated big words might actually be harming you more than helping you. And I've listened to podcasts, a lot of podcasts. I get about 40 hours a week of listening time in for podcasts at work. And I'm always looking for a new show, by the way. So let me know about yours. I want to listen. But when I listen to shows when the person presenting is highly technical or highly experienced, or they're just infatuated with big words, that they lose me. Now, I'm an educated person. I've got degrees. I've got postgraduate degrees. I know my stuff. I can use fancy words, but do I need to? Do I really need to use big, impressive $5 words? No. There's actually podcasts about podcasting that are all based on big, fancy words. And I find it to be distressing to listen to this show because I'm like, I don't even know what you're saying. And it just sounds like you need some time alone because it's really awkward listening to somebody, okay, here's a big word, pontificate in front of you and be like, I don't know what that word means, and I feel stupid, and I'm going to go. And if that's what you're shooting for, then you're doing a great job because some of these podcasts are just annoying. There's no reason to use those words. Talk normal. Talk in your normal speech patterns. You're not impressing anyone. As Shania Twain would say, that doesn't impress me much. And when I hear stuff like this, I'm just like, is that really right? Because this is my response normally.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard.
Like, there's no reason for it. There's no reason for the words coming out of your mouth hole. And it doesn't serve the podcast. It definitely doesn't serve the audience. It seems like you're just ego stroking. And I find that uncomfortable as a listener. I really do. I get that you're a smart person, but do you need to prove it with every second sentence? No. Let your content be the smart part, not just you. Unless the podcast is all about you, and then you do you, boo. But for me, not interested. And your audience might be leaving not because of your content. Your content would be amazing. You're just having a hard time connecting with people. That's the part of podcasting that's more important than your content, is your connection with people. Because if nobody's listening to your podcast, it's that whole tree in the forest thing. Who cares about your smarts when nobody cares to listen because you don't care to connect? And therein lies the problem. is sometimes we use big fancy words and we're just pushing people away. We got to keep that in mind. So there are times when you're going to need to talk about something that might be a little over the heads of your audience, especially if they're net new to the topic you're talking about, right? So you're going to have to explain these things, and you need to use proper terminology. We're not talking about dumbing it down. That seems kind of dismissive, right? No, we're not talking about dumbing down topics and speaking to the lowest denominator of who might be listening to my show, and then alienating all the people who know what I'm talking about to the point where they're like, this guy's talking so simple, I don't understand. This person, I have no idea why they're talking down to me like this. I'm leaving. So at the same thing, you have to understand your audience. And if you have a mix of people who understand the topic well and a group of people who have no idea what you're talking about, that's an interesting balance that you're going to have to kind of straddle so that you can reach into both audiences and serve them well. I try to do this on Living the Next Chapter, my author podcast. It's kind of an example of this. I have authors who come on and they know everything about writing a book. And there's big terminologies, there's inside baseball talk around writing a book and the process and publishers and editors. And there's these types of editors and they do this and this is an acronym for that and this is a way to do this. And as a reader, you're like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I just want to know where to buy the book. But they'll go on and on and on and on about the whole process of writing, which is good. It really helps the authors who listen to the show. What I do on purpose, though, is I limit that part of the conversation in that show to about 10% of our time together. And 90% is focused on readers. Because the people listening for the technical and the how-to part of writing a book, they're going to go and do their own thing. They might not be interested in your book as a reader, but they just want to pick your brain as a fellow author and say, well, how'd you do it so I can do what you did or do it differently than you did? And they're just here for the technical side. So I have a mix of technical and non-technical for Living the Next Chapter, and I think I can bridge that gap pretty good. And having percentages of time devoted to each, the technical side of writing and the non-technical side of writing, the reader side, gives me a nice mix in the episode so that my audience can be served well. I'm meeting the technical needs of my authors who want to learn about the author process, but at the same time, I'm not alienating all my readers who give two craps about how to write a book. They're just there to read. That's what I try to do in that show. So the key here is avoiding big words. It's not about eliminating the technical accuracy of what you're talking about, especially if you have a very heavy topic that requires you to explain things in a very technical way or with big words. It's knowing your audience first and then linking complex ideas to what they already understand. So a lot of analogies, metaphors, and a lot of using story to illustrate a point really helps people to understand what you're talking about. Now, okay, so here's another example. I'm going to do it for you right now. I went to school for HR and I learned how to do interviews. Recruitment and selection was one of my favorite topics for HR. And I love doing interviews. And we learned the art of a good interview and how to do an interview and how to prepare. And there's a lot of terminology. There's a lot of know-how. There's a lot of understanding how people think. My background is in educational psychology. So I understand how people learn and I can tailor what I do to navigate how people approach learning. And it's really come into play in podcasting and teaching this and helping podcasters and leading conversations around the topic of podcasting. So I have that as a skill set, as an advantage. But I don't demonstrate the skill set. I demonstrate the ability to put that skill set into practice. I understand how to take something and convert it into something a little bit more manageable. So you probably haven't gone to school for recruitment and selection. You probably have been interviewed, but you're probably not an expert in interviewing people for jobs. So here's an example. I talk about the red door. I've mentioned it here on the podcast and on other shows I've been on as a guest. And the red door concept for me is simply having something memorable to remind you of the conversation in the future. So I would do interviews and for jobs and job placements, and I'd have 30, 40, 50 people I would interview in one day. You can't remember all those people and every element about them. And what I would do is take their resume and I would make a few notes at the top of the page on their resume so that I could remember this conversation. So their resume was my notepad. And I would write down something that was memorable about the conversation that I could recall later. Why the red door? As a person who's bought real estate in the past, you go around with a real estate agent, you see a bunch of houses in a short amount of time, and you start mixing them all up. And that house that was on this street over there, was that the house with a fireplace, or did that have the pool? And you're like, I can't remember. And you're trying to remember all this stuff and kind of pick the best and get rid of the worst. And you see a lot of houses. So my wife and I came up with the red door. Simply was, we saw a house with a red door. And we're like, was that the house with the red door? And as soon as you said that, it was like, oh yeah. And it had this and the closets and then this and then that. Everything kind of came into play because you could remember the red door. And in podcasting, as an interviewer, I always want to remember somebody's red door. There's something about this conversation that stands out. What is it, and how does that remind me of what happened? So there you go, an example of something technical reframed into something that's non-technical, but more broadly related to people who have been trained as a recruitment and selection expert and people who have just been interviewed for a job and don't understand what goes on behind the scenes. So I was able to take a concept and apply it to two different groups of people without embarrassing the people that are super smart and really good at it, and give them a way of looking at it in a different context, but also then helping people who don't have the skills, talent, and expertise to understand what the topic is without feeling alienated. That's what I'm talking about. And at no point did I need any big words to make me seem smarter than I am. I think some people are educated beyond their intelligence, really, and they try to cover that up by using big words because they're afraid of being found out. And unfortunately, we know. We found out. And just keep that in mind. The problem. Why do we reach for big words as podcasters in our podcast? I think we reach for big words because we assume too much, or we assume too little knowledge from our audience. And both extremes cause disengagement. If you think your audience is super smart, and so you speak to them, you're alienating the people that are not as smart and is not as knowledgeable. If you think that everybody is totally inept and they have no idea what you're talking about, then you're going to talk down to everybody and come off as full of yourself. Or, I'm so smart, good thing I'm here to save the day, right? And that's off-putting as well. People are like, I don't feel welcome here because I feel like you're either talking down to me or you're talking over my head. And right there, you've missed the key part of podcasting. It's about connection. It's not about content. Content's important. Connection without content is, they kind of go hand in hand. And content without connection, same thing. They work together. The solution is to calibrate first and understand how to read the room. We've talked about this on the show as well. How to read the room. There's a few elements here that you need to consider when you're doing a podcast. So as a podcaster, are you having a one-on-one conversation? That's one approach. And you're going to tailor your conversation to that. You're not talking to a group of people now. You're talking to one person. So what do you know about that person you're going to talk to? I do pre-interviews. So I know the person I'm talking to and I can prepare. That's what I do. I don't know what you do, but that's what I do. And it seems to work really well. When you're talking one-on-one, you know the person you're sitting across the table from. That's how it works. I know how my wife likes to be spoken to and how to have a conversation with her. So I approach her differently than I would somebody at work that I kind of know, but I don't really know. And we don't really have a deep relationship at work, but I had enough to have a conversation. I have one-on-one conversations with people and I tailor how I show up to them based on what I know about them. So that's the first one. You can also be speaking at an event and how you prepare for that. So what's the event like? What's the knowledge level of the group that's going to be sitting in front of me? Are they all net new to this? Am I doing a How to Podcast 101 with a bunch of people who don't have shows? Or am I talking to people who have been in the industry for 25 years? Two different groups. And if you have a mix of both, well, then you really need to figure out how you're going to do this so you don't alienate either one or embarrass yourself in front of either one. Speaking in front of events, that's a totally different approach than one-on-one. So when I talk to people who are professional speakers, they have a hard time speaking to people one-on-one because they're used to talking to group speak and large groups and being the center of attention. One-on-one, you're not the center of attention. The conversation is the center of attention. So that's another one. Also, we have impromptu group sessions. So for me, I have meetups, where how I show up in a meetup group as a facilitator is different than how I show up as a podcaster and different than how I show up as a one-on-one. These group sessions ask something different of you. So how do you show up there? And then walking into a group of specialists, like people who know their stuff. You gotta be ready. Think about like politics or money or finance or religion or history. You can't just fake your way through a conversation with experts. They'll see right through you. You need to show up. You need to calibrate yourself for the function and the audience that you'll be in front of or speaking to or speaking with or at. And you need to calibrate yourself for the room. You got to read the room. And what happens is I meet people who have one approach and they try to use the one approach everywhere. And sometimes it flops because they're using words that people don't use in regular everyday speech. And when you do that, you alienate people. Kind of like this.
Of prefamulated amulite surmounted by a malleable logarithmic casing in such a way that the two spurving bearings were in a direct line with a panometric fan. The lineup consisted simply of 6 hydrocoptic Marsal vanes, so fitted to the ambifacient lunar wane shaft that side fumbling was effectively prevented. The main winding was of the normal Lotus O deltoid type placed in panendermic semi-boloid slots of the stator. Every 7th conductor being connected by a non-reversible tremie pipe to the differential girdle spring on the up end of the gram meters. The original machine had a base plate of prefamulated amulite surmounted by a malleable logarithmic casing in such a way that the two spurving bearings were in a direct line with a panometric fan. The lineup consisted simply of 6 hydrocoptic Marsal vanes, so fitted to the ambifacient lunar wane shaft that side fumbling was effectively prevented. The main winding was of the normal Lotus O deltoid type placed in panendermic semi-boloid slots of the stator. Every 7th conductor being connected by a non-reversible tremie pipe to the differential girdle spring on the up end of the gram meters.
Yeah, what he said. Yeah, right? Did you get all that? If you got all that, go to my podcast website, howtopodcast.ca, hit the speak pipe button, and translate that for me, because I have no idea what this guy just said. And when I listen to podcasts and I hear that coming from you, I'm like, who's your audience? Who are you talking to? Because I just stumbled upon this podcast. It was randomly suggested or somebody told me to listen or I just happened to find it. When I hear that, I'm like, what? I don't even know where to start. And I feel stupid because I have no idea what this guy's talking about. But somebody does. So if you want to limit your audience to only experts, then that's your growth barrier for your podcast. You're only going to reach people who understand what you're saying when you use words like this because they understand you.
The main winding was of the normal Lotus O deltoid type placed in panendermic.
So instead of using big words just to impress people and show how smart you are, let the content do that on its own. People, again, come for you as a podcaster and stay with you because they like you. And they like your content. That really works well. But connect the unknown to the known. Even if you're talking to a group of experts, they still like a refreshing connection between what they know and building something around the idea and the topic that helps them to communicate it better. So don't be afraid of that. People are going to enjoy that, even if they're experts and way above you. By you connecting something to something more common without using big words to be your deflection, I just think of big words as being like a shield. That's like, I'm super smart and this is my shield of big words to keep you at bay. There's a protection. It's there to keep people back. Let people see you. And again, talk to us as a listener, not as a performance, not as somebody that you need to impress, but as somebody that needs to connect with you. And again, if you have a mixed audience, when you talk above everybody's head, you're talking to nobody. Just keep it in mind. The magic here is to find the link between the known and the unknown elements of your topic and not rely so heavily on big words to be the bridge between a very difficult concept and a very disconnected audience who doesn't understand what you're talking about. So here's some actionable things you can do when preparing for your next talk, podcast, thing that you're going to be doing in front of people, one-on-one or in public. Here's some things to do. First, ask a calibration question before the explanation, before you get too deep into your topic. Before you explain anything, meeting, email, presentation, or conversation, ask one simple qualifying question to gauge your audience knowledge level. So if I'm going to meet with a bunch of podcasters to talk podcasting, I'm going to ask the event planner, the podcast host, the meeting facilitator, I'm going to ask them, before I get into my topic, how familiar is the audience or you with the topic of the day? Okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 has never heard of this and 10 says, I could teach this myself, where do you sit as a listener in this conversation? I need to understand your level of competence around this topic. Or have you ever worked with this before, or is this your first time having this conversation about this specific thing? Why does this work? It prevents you from defaulting to big words and jargon because you're no longer guessing about who your audience is. You know who they are. And you're meeting people where they are actually in the moment instead of where you anticipate them to be. So if you don't know, ask, basically. And then the second is replace one jargon term with a simple analogy or a metaphor. So I know you love your big words, and it's going to be hard to convince you otherwise, but I would encourage you to, when you're thinking about talking and presenting, that you replace something from your speech, your topic, your conversation, your notes, with, take out that big jargon word or big fancy $5 word and replace it with something a little simpler for people to understand and for people to see themselves in. People like stories more than your big fancy words. Identify the most technical or complex term in your explanation and replace it with an analogy, metaphor, something that's relatable. This process actually helps you to connect with your audience, and it helps even if you already understand the topic. You're not alienating anyone by doing this. So instead of, we need to optimize our conversion funnel, think of it this way. It's like a leaky bucket. We're losing people at every stage, and we need to plug the holes. See, that's not offensive to somebody who understands your topic, and it's really easy for somebody who doesn't to fit in to what you're talking about. And instead of, we're deconstructing vocal image into 5 core concepts, you could say, on day 1, I'm teaching you how to play your instrument. Your voice and body language really count in communication. Why does this work? Analogies translate complexity into familiar things that people can connect with. People don't need to learn new vocabulary. We're not here for a lesson in English or your language of choice. That's not why we're here. It's not an English lesson. We're here to connect with what you're saying or something that you know that we don't. That's why we're here. We're here to connect with you. So it's all about connection. Keep that in mind. And then the third part, test your explanation on a 6-year-old before delivering it. You're like, Dave, that sounds kind of demeaning. Like a 6-year-old needs to understand what I'm talking about? Yeah, if they could understand what you're saying, then you're probably doing something right. Before diverting your focus on these adults, think about a 6-year-old and how they approach the topic themselves. Ask yourself, could a 6-year-old or someone with zero background in my field understand the core idea of what I'm saying? If not, you need to simplify even more and take out even more big words. Write or rehearse your explanation. Try it out. Put it down, figure it out. See what it looks like, sounds like, feels like, and get some advice. Get some feedback. And ask if I said this to someone with no expertise or any knowledge about this topic, would they get it? And then identify all the confusing words or concepts and eliminate them, replace them. And replace them with simpler language and add an analogy or something that's relatable for the audience in front of you. Einstein once said, if you can't explain it to a 6-year-old, you don't understand it well enough yourself. And I think that's true. And I think it really forces you to take a complicated message and distill it down into its clearest form, making it better for the communication, for the message to be delivered, for the audience to receive it, and for you to have clarity about what you do. This is something that we as podcasters need to bring into our podcast. So where you feel so inclined to go with the big words, to go with the fancy, think about the people who you're disengaging with and alienating in the process. And if you're okay with that, then continue. If you're struggling for connection with your audience and you don't feel like people are connecting with you as a podcaster, you might be how you're using your words. You might be talking down to people and talking too simply. You might be talking over their heads and being so grandiose and head in the clouds, 30,000 foot view. Well, most people don't live at 30,000 feet. Most people live on the ground, thanks to gravity. So you might want to talk to the people who still get their feet dirty and still walk on this earth. So instead of going too high or too low, consider your audience, get the knowledge before you get in front of people. Even if it's one-on-one, if it's speaking at an event, if it's just something that pops up where you're asked to speak in front of a group, or you're walking into a meeting with some of the top people in your industry. Understand the room, read the room, and don't talk over people, don't talk under them. Connect with your audience, and you'll see better results than you ever will by just defaulting to, what's the biggest word I can do to impress people right now? Because again, Shania Twain would say, doesn't impress me much. Thanks for listening. Talk to you tomorrow with smaller words. See ya.
This episode got me thinking about something I've been doing almost every Saturday for the last several years now. Regarding real change taking longer than a weekend, I wanted to mention a podcast meetup run by a friend of the show, David Campbell. Rather than have Dave do a promo about it himself, I spoke with a fellow member of the group, Bill Monty.
I was so lucky to just stumble upon Dave's meetings. The first meeting, I knew this was different than other groups I had belonged to. First off, the other groups I had to pay to be in. And sometimes I was completely ignored, never asked a question or even acknowledged that I was part of a little 5-person group. And so this became something very different for me. And really it was someone tossing me a lifeline, because at that point I was just thinking about giving up podcasting. Dave uses the word community a lot. And that's exactly what we've built. We've built this little podcasting community of people who actually care for each other. There's no judgment. There's no sales. It's a great place to learn, and it's a great place to feel safe.
If you're looking for a podcast community that feels more like a long-term conversation than a weekend transformation, the easiest way to join is visit Dave's site, howtopodcast.ca, and scroll down to the meetup. It's free, and honestly, it's one of the few podcast groups I keep coming back to.